Before the sun rose this morning, something happened in your area that no one could fully explain. It was not loud enough to wake every sleeping house, and it was not dramatic enough to appear on the evening news. Yet by breakfast, people who rarely spoke to one another were standing at gates, leaning across fences, and lowering their voices as though the streets themselves might be listening. The unusual part was not only what had happened. It was the fact that several people, in different places, had all noticed the same thing and somehow, without understanding why, they had begun connecting it to someone who sounded very much like you. At first, the story seemed harmless. A shopkeeper unlocking his door noticed a small envelope resting beneath the handle. There was no stamp, no address, and no name written on the front. Inside was a single sheet of paper bearing a sentence that made him sit down before he had even turned on the lights. Across town, a woman found an identical envelope beneath the windshield wiper of her car. A retired teacher discovered one placed neatly beside the morning newspaper on his porch. None of them knew one another well. None had reason to receive a message. Yet the handwriting was the same, and so were the words, "The person you overlooked is the reason something good is about to return." By 9 o'clock, photographs of the notes had begun circulating from phone to phone. People enlarged the writing, compared the paper, and searched for hidden marks. Some laughed and called it a prank. Others insisted it was part of a local promotion. But beneath their explanations, another feeling was forming, the quiet discomfort of recognition. Each person who received the message could remember someone they had underestimated, dismissed, or failed to thank. And while they tried to determine who had left the envelopes, an even stranger detail emerged. Every recipient had crossed paths with you during a different season of your life. One had seen you years ago when you were struggling quietly and pretending everything was fine. Another remembered a day when you offered kindness without knowing anyone was watching. One had heard your name spoken during a conversation you were never meant to know about. And one, though they had not admitted it yet, carried regret over a decision that altered your path. These people did not share a friendship, a workplace, or a family connection. Their only common thread was a moment involving you, a moment so small that you may have forgotten it, but so meaningful that it had remained with them. This was why the conversations changed as the morning continued. Curiosity gave way to memory. Memory gave way to guilt. In a quiet cafe near the center of town, two people sat across from each other with untouched coffee cooling between their hands. One of them whispered, "Do you think this is about what happened back then?" The other glanced toward the window before answering, "I thought no one else knew." Neither spoke your name aloud, but both were thinking it. And neither realized that someone at the table behind them had already heard enough to understand that the notes were not random. You may wonder why this story begins with strangers and envelopes when your own life has felt so still. Perhaps nothing unusual seemed to happen when you opened your eyes today. The same ceiling was above you. The same responsibilities waited. The same unanswered questions followed you from yesterday into this morning. Yet beneath the ordinary surface, the atmosphere around your name was changing. People who once avoided an old truth were being drawn back toward it. Words they had buried were rising again. What had been scattered across several lives was beginning to assemble into one story. There was a time when you believed that being overlooked meant being forgotten. You watched others receive recognition for things you quietly helped create. You saw doors open for people who had not carried half the weight you had carried. You learned to smile when someone misunderstood your heart because explaining yourself had become more exhausting than remaining silent. What no one told you was that silence does not erase truth. Sometimes it preserves truth until the people involved are finally mature enough to face it. And now, in your area, those people were beginning to face something they had spent a long time avoiding. Around noon, the first recipient decided to take the note to the local community office. He expected someone there to dismiss it, but the woman behind the desk froze when she saw the handwriting. She opened a drawer and removed an old folder with bent corners and a faded label. "Where did you get this?" she asked. When he explained, she did not answer immediately. Instead, she closed the office door, turned the sign to "Back in 10 minutes," and spread several documents across the desk. On one page was a handwritten statement from years earlier. The letters leaned in the same direction. The spacing was identical. Whoever had written the mysterious notes had also written something connected to an unresolved event from your past. The folder had not been opened in a long time. Dust marked its edges, and one page had yellowed where sunlight had once reached it. Inside were records of a community decision that had affected several families, though the full consequences were never publicly discussed. Your name appeared only once, written in the margin beside a question mark. It was easy to miss. In fact, almost everyone had missed it. But the woman behind the desk remembered the day the note was added. She remembered an argument in the hallway, a door closing, and someone saying, "One day, they will discover who actually made the difference." That sentence had bothered her for years because no one explained who they meant. She assumed it referred to officials, relatives, or perhaps the community itself. Now, looking at the new envelope, she wondered whether it had always referred to the people receiving these messages. What if the notes were leading them back to the same forgotten decision? What if someone had waited until exactly this moment to make them remember? And why had the writer chosen today, after so much time had passed? While those questions spread, you may have felt something you could not name, a restlessness that did not belong to fear, but did not feel like peace either. Perhaps you paused while doing something simple because a memory surfaced without warning. A familiar street. A conversation that ended too quickly. A room where you felt judged before you had spoken. You might have wondered why your mind returned there after all these years. But memories sometimes rise when the truth connected to them begins moving elsewhere. Your heart can sense the opening of a door long before your eyes see the handle turn. By early afternoon, another message appeared, but this one was different. It was not hidden beneath a door or left on a car. It was pinned to the community notice board where anyone could see it. The paper moved gently in the warm breeze as people gathered around. Instead of one sentence, it contained 3 lines. You called it coincidence because the truth required courage. You called them ordinary because you did not understand their strength. Before nightfall, return what was never yours to keep. The final line changed everything. Until then, the mystery had seemed emotional, a collection of regrets, forgotten kindnesses, and unfinished conversations. Now there was something tangible involved. Something had been kept. Something belonged to another person. And several faces in the crowd revealed that at least a few people understood more than they were willing to say. One man stepped away and immediately made a phone call. A woman folded her arms tightly and stared at the ground. Someone else photographed the message, then deleted the picture moments later. Rumors grew quickly, but the truth remained just beyond reach. Some said it involved money. Others believed it was a letter that had never reached its intended recipient. One person mentioned a set of documents. Another insisted it was connected to property that had changed hands under unusual circumstances. Yet beneath every theory was the same question: why did people keep mentioning you? You were not the wealthiest person in the area. You were not the loudest. You had not demanded attention or built your life around being seen. But perhaps that was exactly why your name had remained hidden for so long. People often assume the quiet person knows the least, when sometimes the quiet person is the center of a truth everyone else has been circling. There had been a moment in your life when someone offered you an explanation that never felt complete. They spoke carefully, giving you enough information to stop asking questions but not enough to understand what had actually occurred. You may have accepted their words because you were tired, because you wanted peace, or because you did not yet recognize your right to question what affected your future. Afterward, life moved forward, but a part of you remained standing in that moment, sensing that something had been removed from the story. The people in your area were now returning to that missing piece. One by one, they began contacting each other. The shopkeeper closed early. The retired teacher searched through an old cabinet. The woman from the community office called someone whose number she had not dialed in more than a decade. When he answered, she asked only one question: "Do you still have the box?" There was a long silence before he replied, "I was hoping no one would ever ask me that." The box was kept in a house at the edge of the area, inside a locked room that had once belonged to someone who knew your family history better than you realized. It was not large. It was made of dark wood, with a brass latch and a scratch across the lid. For years, it had been moved from shelf to shelf without being opened. The man who kept it told himself he was protecting what was inside. But protection and concealment can look remarkably similar when fear is involved. The truth was that he had been given instructions: keep the box until a certain sign appeared, then deliver it to the person whose name was written beneath the lining. He never expected the sign to come through anonymous envelopes. He never expected several people to receive the same message. Most of all, he never expected the entire area to begin talking before he had decided what to do. Yet as he carried the box from the locked room into the light, he noticed something that made his hands tremble. The brass latch was already open. Nothing inside appeared disturbed. There were photographs, several folded papers tied with string, a key without a label, and a sealed document resting at the bottom. But atop everything lay a fresh white envelope. Unlike the others, this one had a name written across the front. Your name. The man did not open it. For the first time all day, the whispers stopped. Those gathered in the house stared at the envelope as if it had spoken. Someone asked whether you should be called immediately. Another said they needed to understand the contents before involving you. The retired teacher disagreed. That is how this began, he said quietly. People deciding what they had a right to keep from them. His words filled the room with a truth no one could escape. For years, choices had been made around you without your knowledge. People had called it protection, timing, or necessity. Yet each decision had taken something from you: the freedom to understand your own story. Now the box had returned, the notes had appeared, and the people who once controlled the truth were losing their ability to contain it. But just as someone reached for the envelope, a phone rang. The woman from the community office answered. Her expression changed before she spoke a single word. On the other end was a person who had not lived in the area for many years, someone everyone believed had left without explanation. Their voice was weak but urgent. "Do not open the letter yet," they said. "There is one person missing from that room." The woman looked around at every face gathered near the box. "Who?" she asked. The answer came slowly. "The person who knows why their name was written there in the first place." And then, from just outside the house, came the sound of a car door closing. The footsteps outside were slow, measured, and strangely familiar to everyone in the room except the youngest person standing near the doorway. No one spoke as the handle turned. The man holding the wooden box tightened his grip, while the woman from the community office lowered the phone but did not end the call. For a few suspended seconds, the only sound was the faint rustle of papers beneath the envelope bearing your name. Then the door opened. An elderly woman stood on the threshold with one hand resting against the frame. Her silver hair had been pinned back carefully, though several loose strands moved in the evening breeze. She carried no bag, no umbrella, and no explanation for how she had arrived so quickly. What unsettled the room was not her appearance. It was the way nearly every older person there reacted to her presence. Some stepped backward. One covered his mouth. The retired teacher whispered her name as though speaking it might awaken something that had been sleeping for years. She looked first at the box, then at the envelope. Her eyes did not show surprise. They showed exhaustion, the kind that comes from carrying a truth longer than the heart was ever meant to hold. "I asked you to keep it sealed," she said. The man beside the box swallowed. "I did." Her gaze settled on the open brass latch. "Then someone else has decided the waiting is over." Until that moment, everyone had assumed the anonymous notes came from a living person moving quietly through the area. But the woman's words shifted the mystery in another direction. She approached the table and rested her fingertips on the scratched wooden lid. The touch was gentle, almost apologetic. "This box belonged to your mother's closest friend," she said, "though you were not yet there to hear it. She kept records no one else was brave enough to keep." The room changed at the mention of your family. The rumors about money and property suddenly seemed too simple. Whatever rested beneath those folded papers was connected not only to a forgotten community decision, but to someone who had known your family intimately. The woman asked everyone except the retired teacher and the office worker to leave. A few resisted. One man insisted he had a right to know because his name appeared in the old file. She turned toward him with such calm certainty that his argument disappeared before it formed. "This is not about your right to know," she said. "It is about their right to finally understand." Her words sent the others into the hallway, where whispers began almost immediately. The front room became quieter, but not safer. The retired teacher pulled out a chair for her. She did not sit. Instead, she pointed to the key inside the box. "That opens a drawer in the old meeting hall," she explained. "The drawer has not been touched since the night the vote was changed." The woman from the office frowned. "What vote?" The elderly visitor looked at her with disbelief. "You never knew?" The answer was written across the office worker's face. She had handled the old documents for years. She believed she understood the history of the decision that connected everyone to you. Yet there had been another record, hidden somewhere she had never searched. Many years earlier, the community had been offered funding to restore a neglected section of the area. The official story claimed the plan failed because there was not enough support. People accepted that explanation and moved on. Buildings deteriorated. Families relocated. A small community center closed. Opportunities that could have changed several lives vanished before they began. But the vote had not failed. It had passed. The original count had been altered after the meeting ended. Someone with influence had removed 2 ballots and replaced the final page of the record. The project was then redirected to another district, where private businesses benefited from money intended for the families in your area. The office worker's face paled. "What does that have to do with them?" The elderly woman looked toward the envelope carrying your name. "Everything. At the time of the vote, you were too young to understand the adult speaking behind closed doors. Yet someone in your family had discovered the change. That person had planned to expose it, not for revenge, but because the restored center would have created a scholarship program. Your name had been placed on the earliest draft as the first future recipient. You had never known that such a program existed. You had never known that someone had imagined a different path for you before life demanded that you build one alone." The revelation landed heavily. It was not merely about lost money. It was about a future quietly removed before you were old enough to reach for it. A library that might have nurtured your gifts never opened. A mentorship program that might have surrounded you with encouragement was cancelled. The room where you could have discovered your own voice remained boarded and dark. Yet the elderly woman insisted that this was not the reason your name had returned now. "The scholarship was only the beginning," she said. She reached into her coat and removed a photograph wrapped in a soft cloth. The image showed a group of people standing in front of the old meeting hall. Some were smiling. Others looked tired after a long evening. In the back row stood the elderly woman as a much younger person. Beside her was your mother's friend. And in the front, held in someone's arms, was a small child. You. On the reverse side of the photograph, written in dark ink, were the words, "The one who will bring this place back to life." The retired teacher sat down slowly. He remembered the photograph. He remembered the hope surrounding the project. But he had always believed the sentence referred to the scholarship itself, to the idea that a child from the area would one day succeed and inspire others. The elderly woman knew differently. Your mother's friend had not written the message as a prediction. She had written it after witnessing something that no one else fully understood. Even as a child, you had a strange habit of noticing what adults tried to hide. You once found a missing folder beneath a stack of newspapers during a meeting. You handed it to the very person searching for it, unaware that the papers inside contained the original funding agreement. That small act had briefly exposed the attempt to redirect the money. Someone noticed. Someone became afraid that one day, when you were older, you might uncover the rest. The office worker whispered, "They were a child." "Yes," the elderly woman replied. Which is why no one suspected how far certain people would go to keep the story buried. A silence followed that was different from all the silences before it. This one carried shame. The retired teacher looked toward the window, remembering the adults who had shaped the public explanation. Some had died. Some had moved away. A few still lived nearby, respected and unchallenged. He had known pieces of the story but convinced himself that speaking would cause more harm than good. Now he understood that silence had not prevented harm. It had simply decided who would carry it. The phone, still connected to the distant caller, crackled in the office worker's hand. "Ask her about the second photograph," the voice said. The elderly woman closed her eyes. For the first time since arriving, her composure weakened. "There is no need," she replied. The caller's tone sharpened. "They have waited long enough." The office worker looked between them. "What second photograph?" The elderly woman stared at the box, then slowly lifted the stack of folded papers. Beneath them was a sealed document and a thinner compartment built into the bottom. She pressed one corner. A hidden panel rose slightly. Inside lay another image. This photograph had been taken at night. The meeting hall appeared in the background, its windows glowing. 3 adults stood near a parked car. One held a folder. Another was pointing towards someone outside the frame. The third person was someone you would recognize immediately. Someone who had remained in your life after that night. Someone who had comforted you during difficult years, offered advice, and spoke often about protecting you from disappointment. They had never told you they were present when the original record disappeared. The retired teacher leaned closer. "They said they left before the vote." "They lied," the elderly woman answered. The betrayal was not simple. The person in the photograph had not altered the vote, but they had seen who did. They had been given a choice: reveal the truth and risk losing their position, or remain silent and receive a promise that you would still be cared for privately. They chose silence. For a time, they attempted to keep that promise. They helped when they could. They offered support in indirect ways. Perhaps some kindness you received from them was real. Perhaps their affection was genuine. But every act of care carried the weight of what they had allowed to be taken. That was why they often became uneasy when you spoke about missed opportunities. That was why certain questions caused them to change the subject. That was why they sometimes looked at you with an expression that seemed deeper than ordinary concern. They were not only worried about your future. They were remembering the future they helped erase. Outside the house, more people had gathered. News of the box had moved quickly through the area. Phone screens glowed in the deepening dusk. Neighbors watched from across the road. The mystery had become impossible to contain. The elderly woman turned toward the office worker. "You need to call them before someone else tells them the wrong version." The woman reached for her phone, but before she could dial, headlights swept across the window. A dark vehicle stopped at the curb. This time, no one in the house needed to ask who had arrived. The person from the second photograph stepped out. Older now, but unmistakable. They remained beside the car for several seconds, looking at the crowd, the house, and the light shining through the front window. Then their eyes found the wooden box on the table. Fear crossed their face, followed by something more painful. Relief. They walked through the gathering without defending themselves. No one blocked the path. When they entered the room, they looked at each person in turn before finally staring at the envelope bearing your name. "I know what you think I did," they said. The retired teacher stood. "Then tell us what really happened." The newcomer shook their head. "Not without them here." At that exact moment, the office worker's phone began to ring. Your name appeared on the screen. Everyone froze. She answered and lifted the phone carefully to her ear. Your voice came through, uncertain but clear. "Why are people outside my home talking about an old meeting hall?" No one replied. Then you asked the question that caused the person from the photograph to grip the back of a chair for support. "And why did someone leave a key on my doorstep?" The elderly woman turned toward the box. The key was no longer inside. The silence that followed your question was unlike any silence the room had ever known. It was not the silence of confusion. It was the silence that arrives when truth finally reaches the doorway after years of being turned away. The woman from the community office closed her eyes for a brief moment before speaking gently into the phone. "Yes," she whispered. "Please come to the old meeting hall. There is something that has waited a very long time for you." You did not ask another question. Somehow, deep within your heart, you already knew that whatever awaited you there was connected to the strange feeling that had followed you throughout the day. As twilight settled over the streets, people quietly gathered outside the old building. The meeting hall looked almost forgotten. Ivy climbed across its faded brick walls, the windows reflected the colors of the evening sky, and years of dust covered the wooden steps leading to the entrance. You walked toward the building carrying the mysterious key. No one rushed you. No one tried to explain. For the first time, everyone understood that this moment belonged to you. When you reached the door, the elderly woman smiled with gentle kindness. "Go ahead," she said softly. "The truth has been waiting for your hands." Your fingers trembled as the key slid into the old lock. For years that lock had refused every attempt to open it. Yet with almost effortless grace, it turned. The heavy wooden door slowly opened inward. A cool breath of air drifted out, carrying the scent of aged wood, paper, and memories that had patiently survived the passing decades. Inside, moonlight spilled across rows of empty chairs. Dust floated gently through the beams of light like tiny stars suspended in stillness. It felt less like entering a forgotten building, and more like stepping into a chapter of your own life that had never been allowed to begin. Near the front of the hall stood an old cabinet. The second key fit perfectly. As the drawer slid open, there was no treasure chest overflowing with riches. There was something far more valuable. Letters. Dozens of carefully preserved letters. Newspaper clippings. Original meeting records. Photographs. Handwritten journals. And resting on top, a simple envelope addressed to you. The handwriting matched every mysterious message that had appeared throughout the area. With quiet hands, you opened it. Inside was a letter written many years earlier. It read, "If you are reading this, then the truth has finally found enough courage to walk into the light. You may discover that opportunities were taken from you. You may learn that others made choices you never deserved. Do not allow those discoveries to harden your heart. The greatest inheritance I can leave you is not a building. Not a scholarship. Not forgotten records. It is the reminder that your future has never belonged to the people who underestimated you. It has always belonged to the character you continued building when no one was watching." The room became perfectly still. Several people quietly wiped tears from their eyes. Not because the mystery had been solved, but because the letter refused to end with blame. Instead, it offered freedom. The person from the second photograph slowly stepped forward. For years they had rehearsed countless explanations. Every excuse now felt empty. Every defense seemed unnecessary. They looked directly into your eyes. "I was afraid," they admitted. "I told myself staying silent would protect everyone. Instead, it protected my comfort and stole your understanding. I cannot return the years that passed. But I can finally give you the truth." There were no dramatic arguments. No shouting. No revenge. Only honesty. Sometimes the deepest healing begins not when someone proves they were right, but when someone finally admits they were wrong. The elderly woman gathered the original documents together. "These belong to you now," she said. "Not because they define your future, but because your story should never again be incomplete." Over the following weeks, something remarkable happened throughout the community. The forgotten records were restored. The altered history was corrected. The abandoned meeting hall was no longer left empty. Instead of becoming a monument to old mistakes, it became a place where children gathered after school, neighbors volunteered together, musicians performed, artists created, and families found hope again. A new scholarship program was established not to replace what had been lost, because some moments can never be recreated, but to ensure that future dreams would never be quietly taken away again. When the organizers discussed what to name it, several suggestions filled the room. Then someone unfolded the old photograph. On the back were the words, "The one who will bring this place back to life." No one needed another vote. The decision was unanimous. Not because of wealth. Not because of fame. Not because of perfection. But because your story had reminded an entire community that quiet faithfulness can change generations. The greatest surprise, however, was not found in the documents or the restored building. It appeared in ordinary conversations. Neighbors who had ignored one another began speaking again. Old friendships healed. Families who had carried silent regrets found the courage to apologize. Children laughed in a place that had once echoed with disappointment. The unusual event everyone had been talking about was never merely the mysterious envelopes. The true miracle was what happened inside human hearts once hidden truth met humble honesty. Sometimes people imagine that extraordinary moments arrive with thunder, flashing lights, or impossible signs. Yet many of life's greatest transformations begin much more quietly. One conversation. One confession. One unopened letter. One person choosing courage over fear. And one heart deciding that forgiveness is stronger than resentment. My beloved child, if this fictional story leaves you with anything, let it be this. Never believe that forgotten kindness is wasted. Never assume that unseen faithfulness has no value. Even when life feels delayed, overlooked, or misunderstood, your character continues writing chapters that circumstances cannot erase. The world may not always recognize quiet goodness immediately. But truth has a remarkable way of finding its moment. And when it does, it rarely changes only one life. It has the power to awaken many others. May peace guard your heart when answers seem slow. May wisdom guide every decision you make. May hope remain brighter than disappointment. May forgiveness free you from burdens that were never yours to carry. And may your future be filled with unexpected doors that open at exactly the right time. Thank you for spending these moments with me and sharing in this fictional inspirational journey. If this story encouraged your heart, brought you hope, or reminded you that light can rise even after long seasons of waiting, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who may need its message today. Until we meet again, may peace, hope, and countless blessings walk beside you every step of your journey.